The late afternoon sun bathed Ashford in a warm, golden glow as Emma sat at the kitchen table, her fingers nervously tapping on her phone. Her mind was racing with a mixture of guilt and excitement. For the past few weeks she had been exchanging messages with Lucas, a man she had met online. It had started innocently enough, a harmless conversation on a forum about books. But soon, their chats became more frequent, more personal. Lucas was attentive, charming, and seemed to understand her in ways Ethan Roy, her husband, hadn't in a long time. Ethan Roy was a police officer in Ashford, dedicated to his work. Emma admired his commitment, but it had come at a cost. Their marriage, once full of passion, had become distant and cold. Ethan's long hours and constant preoccupation with his cases left Emma feeling lonely, so when Lucas started showing her attention, it felt like a breath of fresh air. She stared at her latest message from Lucas. "You're special, Emma. I've never felt this way before. Let's meet. I want to see you in person." Her heart raced. She hadn't imagined this would go beyond the digital world. But the idea of meeting him, of feeling wanted again, was intoxicating. She quickly typed a response. "When and where?" A minute later, her phone buzzed with his reply. "Tomorrow night. The old construction site on Elm Street at 8 p.m. It's quiet, just us. I have something special planned." Emma felt a surge of excitement, followed by a twinge of doubt. Meeting at a construction site? It seemed odd, but Lucas had always been a bit mysterious, and she didn't want to back out now. That evening, Ethan Roy returned home late, as usual. He looked tired, the weight of his work evident in his slouched shoulders. He greeted Emma with a quick peck on the cheek before disappearing into his office. Emma sighed and checked her phone again, reading Lucas's message one more time. The next day, Ethan sat at his desk in the Ashford Police Department, going over the details of a troubling case. Several women had gone missing in nearby towns, all under suspicious circumstances. There were no clear patterns, but Ethan had a gut feeling they were all connected, possibly linked to human trafficking. It was one of the hardest cases he had ever worked on, and it consumed his every thought. But despite his focus on the case, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off at home. Emma had been acting differently lately, distracted, distant, and always on her phone. They had been growing apart for months, but recently she seemed preoccupied with something or someone. That evening, as Emma sat on the couch, Ethan noticed her typing furiously on her phone, her face lit up with a smile. His instincts as a police officer kicked in, and for the first time he felt a pang of suspicion. He glanced over at her screen, catching a glimpse of a message she was sending to someone named Lucas. Ethan's heart sank. He knew he shouldn't pry, but his instincts were screaming at him to look closer. He couldn't ignore it. When Emma left the room, he quickly grabbed her phone and scrolled through the messages. His heart pounded as he read Lucas's last message. "Tomorrow night at 8 p.m. The old construction site on Elm Street." Ethan's mind raced. Elm Street was in a rundown part of town, and the construction site had been abandoned for months. Why would Emma go there? His gut told him something was wrong, terribly wrong. He put her phone back, making sure everything looked untouched. He didn't confront her right away. Instead, he decided to wait. The next day passed in a blur for Emma. She was nervous but excited about meeting Lucas. She had told Ethan she was meeting a friend for dinner, a lie that felt bitter in her mouth but necessary to cover her tracks. As the sun set, she dressed casually, trying not to overthink things. Lucas's messages had reassured her that everything would be perfect. He had promised her something special, something she had been missing in her life for far too long. Ethan, on the other hand, couldn't shake the feeling of dread. He had spent the entire day going over the details of the missing women's case, but his mind kept drifting back to Emma. He had to find out what was going on. When she left the house that evening, Ethan gave her a kiss on the forehead, trying to act normal. But the moment she walked out the door, he sprang into action. He quickly accessed her phone's GPS location through a tracking app, one he had installed without her knowledge for emergencies. He watched as her location moved toward Elm Street. His heart pounded as he grabbed his jacket and followed her. Emma arrived at the old construction site, the wind picking up as the night grew darker. The site was abandoned, half-built structures looming over her. She pulled out her phone, seeing Lucas's message from earlier. "I'm inside on the 3rd floor of the main building. Can't wait to see you." Her excitement was mixed with unease. The place was eerie, and the silence was unnerving. But she brushed it off, convincing herself that Lucas was just being romantic in his own way. She stepped into the building, her footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. As she climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned quickly but saw no one. Her phone buzzed again. "Hurry up, I'm waiting." She took a deep breath and continued. When she reached the 3rd floor, the room was dark except for a single light bulb flickering from the ceiling. Lucas stood in the middle of the room, his back to her. "Lucas," she called out, her voice trembling slightly. He turned, smiling. But there was something in his eyes, something cold and calculating. "I'm so glad you came, Emma." Her stomach dropped. The tone in his voice was different now, more sinister, more predatory. "I thought we were going to talk," Emma stammered, stepping back slightly. Lucas's smile faded. "You think this is just a date? You're not that naive, are you?" Panic surged through her as she realized the danger she was in. She tried to move, but Lucas grabbed her arm, his grip tight. "I've been watching you for weeks," he hissed. "You're not the first woman I've met like this, and you won't be the last." Emma's heart raced as she struggled to break free. "Let me go." Suddenly, a voice boomed from behind them. "Let her go." Ethan Roy stood at the entrance, gun raised, his voice steady but filled with fury. Lucas smirked, tightening his grip on Emma. So, the husband shows up to save the day. How heroic. Ethan's eyes burned with rage as he inched closer, gun trained on Lucas. "I won't say it again." Lucas hesitated for a moment, sizing up the situation. But before he could make a move, Ethan fired. The bullet hit Lucas square in the chest, and he collapsed, releasing Emma as he fell to the ground. Emma stumbled back, her heart pounding in her chest as she watched Lucas bleed out on the floor. Tears streamed down her face as Ethan rushed to her, pulling her into his arms. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't know." Ethan held her tightly, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "It's over now," he whispered. Though he knew that was only partly true, the immediate danger was gone, but the betrayal lingered. As they stood in the dimly lit room, the weight of what had happened pressed down on them both. Ethan knew this wasn't the end. There was more to Lucas's operation, more to the network that had ensnared his wife. But for now, he held Emma close, silently vowing to keep her safe from whatever shadows still lurked in Ashford. In the end, the investigation into Lucas's activities revealed the horrifying extent of his crimes. He had been part of a human trafficking ring, responsible for the abduction and sale of multiple women across the region. Emma had been a target, but she had narrowly escaped, thanks to Ethan's instincts as a police officer. Their marriage, strained by the affair and the trauma of the experience, was far from healed, but with time they began to rebuild their trust, knowing that the shadows of Ashford still loomed over them, waiting for another chance to strike.